It's hard to imagine a Hollywood golden boy sleeping in Central Park, but that was the fate of Troy Donahue in 1970. The blonde, blue-eyed actor who once received 7,000 fan letters a week and sent teenage girls into fits of screams found himself homeless, living out of a backpack in New York City's Central Park. Just a decade earlier, Donahue had been America's clean-cut dreamboat, the star of glossy romance films and a fixture on magazine covers. So this shocking scenario begs the question, how did he plummet from teen idol to destitution? And how did he claw his way back? The mystery of Troy Donahue's life is a tale of dizzying fame, crashing loss, and the slow, hard road to redemption. Get ready, because this is Hollywood's roller coaster at its most unsettling. Welcome to Hollywood Mysteries. Merrill Johnson Jr., the future Troy Donahue, was born in New York City on January 27, 1936. Show business was in his blood. His father, Merrill Sr., headed the motion picture division at General Motors, and his Swedish mother, Dee Dee, was a stage actress. Young Merrill grew up comfortably on Manhattan's Upper East Side, but his childhood was not without trauma. At 6, he contracted pneumonia, and the family moved for a time to a 5-acre farm in Long Island where his sister was born. At age 14, he watched his beloved father wither away and die from what would later become known as Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS. The loss devastated him. In later years, Donahue admitted he never truly recovered from his father's death, which left him feeling lonely, a lost soul, and it fostered an early dependence on alcohol. "I think I was mad at my father for dying," he reflected, recalling how as a teen he would retreat into solitude and secret drinking bouts to cope. This private insecurity would haunt him even at the height of fame. Despite these inner wounds, Merrill Jr. was an outgoing youth in many ways, an athlete, a charmer, a kid with Hollywood dreams. He attended prep school and briefly studied journalism at Columbia University before his mother packed him off to New York Military Academy, where he befriended another young man named Francis Ford Coppola. "I think I threw some stones in his tuba," said Troy, "but everybody throws stones into tubas in high school." This unusual hobby might have captivated him briefly, but acting quickly became his true passion. He performed in summer stock theater and hung around New York casting calls, hoping for a break. In the mid-1950s, barely 20, he took a gamble. He drove cross-country to Hollywood in search of stardom. With his surfer boy looks, tan skin, blonde hair, and startlingly blue eyes, he certainly looked the part of a 1950s matinee idol. The young actor struggled at first, running low on cash and picking up odd jobs. Then fate intervened one night in Los Angeles. One evening in 1956, Merrill was nursing a beer alone at a San Fernando Valley dive called the Golden Pheasant when 2 Hollywood power players walked in, producer William Asher and director James Sheldon. Merrill's all-American looks immediately caught their eye. They struck up a conversation and soon offered the 20-year-old a screen test at Columbia Studios, the opportunity he'd been waiting for. Ecstatic, Merrill accepted. It seemed his Hollywood dream was about to come true, but on the eve of his big break, a shocking disaster nearly struck him down for good. Before I get further into Troy's remarkable rise to stardom, I'd like to remind you that I have a range of Hollywood Mysteries merch available in the Hollywood Mystery Store. All the shirts are designed in-house and are completely exclusive to Hollywood Mysteries. You won't see these anywhere else, so if you're wearing one, it'll be something a little special. I have designs featuring a whole range of stars including Marlena Dietrich, Ramon Navarro, Lupe Velez, and Anna May Wong. You can find a link to the store down in the description, and also it should be appearing on screen now. Every sale is a huge help to the channel, and I love seeing the messages you send with the purchases over on the site. Thank you so much to all of you who have purchased one. Feel free to check it out and grab some unique Hollywood merch. And finally, don't forget to check out the new weekly Hollywood Histories podcast series over on Patreon and in the YouTube members area, available to everyone on the $3 a month tier. I have an upcoming episode on the 1930s screenwriter who was reportedly reincarnated as a toddler, and a double episode on the amazing development of silent-era movie cameras. There's also episodes about King Kong, Butterfly McQueen, and a whole range of new topics on the horizon. If any of that sounds appealing, why not sign up for the 7-day free trial on Patreon? Check out the back catalog and see if you enjoy the new extra episodes. Thank you so much to all the Patreon supporters and YouTube members. It makes all the difference. Now it's time to get back to our leading man, Troy Donahue. Driving along the dark curves of Malibu Canyon after a night of drinking, the young actor lost control of his car. The vehicle skidded off the road, smashed through a guardrail, and plunged 40 feet down into a ravine, slamming into a tree that miraculously halted a deadly freefall of another 200+ feet. Merle was pulled from the wreck with his face a bloody pulp. "They say my face was just two blue eyes staring out of a bucket of red paint," he later recalled of the near-fatal crash. He slipped in and out of consciousness for 2 days with a concussion, cracked ribs, a crushed kidney, a broken kneecap, and dozens of stitches across his face and scalp. He missed the Columbia screen test while lying in a hospital bed, devastated that his once-in-a-lifetime chance might be gone. He healed slowly, scars and all, and refused to give up. Yet Merle Johnson was nothing if not lucky. By summer 1956, not long after recovering, he caught another break. A friend introduced him to a young actress named Fran Bennett, who in turn referred him to her agent, the notorious Henry Wilson. Wilson was a star maker with a flair for rebranding fresh-faced talent. His client list included Rock Hudson and Tab Hunter. The savvy agent took one look at Merle's chiseled features and knew he had a potential star. But first, he needed a more marketable name. Wilson told his new client that the name Merle Johnson simply wouldn't do. "You're Troy Donahue," the agent declared. Wilson said he plucked the first name Troy out of thin air. He reportedly liked its heroic all-American sound and paired it with a random Irish surname. Troy, on the other hand, remembered another story. He said, "At first they had Paris, the lover of Helen of Troy, in mind, but I guess they thought they couldn't name me Paris Donahue because there was already a Paris, France, and Paris, Illinois, so they plumped for Helen's hometown instead. The transformation was official. It was part of me 10 minutes after I got the name," Donahue later said. "Even my mother and sister call me Troy now." With the new identity and Wilson's industry clout, Troy Donahue quickly landed a contract at Universal Studios in late 1956. He was just 21, hungry and determined, if still a bit raw as an actor. Over the next year or two, young Troy paid his dues in Hollywood with a string of small film roles. He was often cast as a wholesome boy next door or uniformed youth, the very image of mid-50s innocence. He made his film debut with a blink and you miss it bit part in Man Afraid in 1957, and had another uncredited role in the biopic Man of a Thousand Faces that same year. He popped up in teen drive-in fare like Live Fast, Die Young, and even a monster movie, Monster on the Campus, where he played a frightened college kid. He also appeared in the Blake Edwards romantic comedy This Happy Feeling, although he was notably absent from the promotional tour, the reason being that he was serving 15 days in jail due to an accumulation of unpaid parking tickets. These were humble beginnings, but Donahue did enough to get noticed. In Douglas Sirk's 1959 melodrama Imitation of Life, a high-profile film, he had a brief yet memorable and deeply shocking scene as a boyfriend who cruelly beats his girlfriend upon learning her mother, and therefore she, is black. Imitation of Life was a hit, and Troy's small turn earned him good reviews for convincingly playing against his nice guy type. Hollywood was beginning to take note of the clean-cut kid with the camera-friendly face and a little bite in his performance. Behind the scenes, things were beginning to fray, however. He had begun dating pretty actress Judy Meredith in 1957, a romance the studio leaped on for publicity purposes. However, when she broke off the relationship with him due to his possessive behavior, Meredith alleged that Troy pushed her face into a glass-covered picture. This was the first sign of a pattern of abusive and drunken behavior that would repeat through his prime years. Not long after his split from Meredith, he began dating a woman named Nan Morris. That relationship was also abusive, and Morris ended it after Donahue threw her into a pool during an argument. Troy's true rocket ride to stardom began in 1959. Warner Brothers, spotting his major potential, signed the 23-year-old to a multi-year studio contract and cast him in a Technicolor romance destined to change his life. Delmer Daves' A Summer Place paired Donahue with the era's top teen actress Sandra Dee in a swooning story of young love on the beaches of Maine. As the earnest Johnny Hunter, Troy embodied every girl's ideal sweetheart, tall, tender, and reliably shirtless amid the sea spray. When A Summer Place hit theaters, it became a cultural phenomenon. The film was a box office smash, the #1 movie in America for weeks, fueled in part by its lush theme song, Max Steiner's theme from A Summer Place, which blanketed radio airwaves. More importantly for Donahue, it made him an overnight star. It was an enormous success, wrote Donahue biographer Michael Michaud, a tidal wave that caught the young actor completely off guard. One day he was a struggling contract player, the next his name was being screamed by throngs of adoring fans. Donahue himself was stunned by the frenzy A Summer Place created. I saw it in a regular theater for the first time in Pasadena, looked around, heard the music, and thought, we might have something here, he remembered. It was pretty heady stuff for a kid 22 years old. Indeed, Troy Donahue had become the face of youthful romance at the dawn of the 1960s. Warner Brothers put him under a long-term contract at $400 a week, a handsome sum for the time, and sent him on a cross-country publicity tour to cultivate his teen following. America's teenagers responded with full-throated enthusiasm. Donahue's face graced the covers of movie magazines. His every move was chronicled in fan club newsletters. He would later recall with amusement how girls reacted during personal appearances. They'd ask me to light a cigarette, and when I did, they screamed and fell down, he said. At the height of his fame, Troy was reportedly receiving up to 7,000 fan letters a week, an avalanche of perfumed envelopes that made him Warner's top mail-getter, ahead of even established stars. Starstruck admirers began literally climbing the fence of his Hollywood home, hoping to glimpse the heartthrob. For a few heady years, Troy Donahue was the ultimate teenage idol, as iconic in his moment as fellow blonde heartthrob Tab Hunter had been a few years before. Meanwhile, he had reconnected with a Swedish actress named Lily Cardell he had met back in 1956. They began dating in 1960 and announced their engagement in January 1961. Once again, the relationship turned shockingly violent. Cardell claimed she had passed by Donahue's home to pick up her dog, only to find he was with another woman, believed to be Suzanne Plachette. Cardell said that Donahue became enraged and punched her to the floor. Cardell filed a suit against Donahue for damages, demanding $60,000. Donahue denied punching her, although he admitted the fight was physical. In the end, Jack Warner stepped in to protect his young star and convinced Cardell to take a $3,000 out-of-court settlement before completely blackballing her from Hollywood and ending her career on the spot for her trouble. Meanwhile, Warner Brothers wasted no time capitalizing on their new matinee idol. Between 1959 and 1964, Donahue churned out a string of romances and dramas, becoming the boy next door to a generation of moviegoers. He reunited with director Delmer Daves for several glossy hits in 1961 and 1962, Parish, a coming-of-age saga set on a Connecticut tobacco farm, Susan Slade, in which she plays the steadfast beau of a pregnant Connie Stevens, and Rome Adventure, a sun-dappled love story filmed in Italy where Donahue's character wins the heart of a young librarian played by Suzanne Plachette. In the last of those, Art Imitated Life, Troy and Plachette began a romance off-screen as well. The pair would marry in early 1964, making headlines as a picture-perfect Hollywood couple. The marriage sadly would prove as brief as a summer fling. More on that later. Beyond the big spring, Donahue also became a familiar face on television, further expanding his celebrity. He headlined 2 popular ABC TV series produced by Warner Brothers, Surfside 6, in which he played a suave private detective living on a houseboat in Miami, and in which he also embarked on an affair with co-star Diane McBain off-screen, and Hawaiian Eye, where he portrayed a social director at a luxury Hawaiian hotel. These shows, essentially spin-offs of the hit 77 Sunset Strip, brought Troy into millions of living rooms weekly. He was now a bona fide household name, his clean-cut look emblematic of an era when youth culture meant crew cuts and Letterman sweaters, just before the tumult of the late 60s changed everything. Yet, even as Donahue rode this wave of fame, there were early signs that all was not as charmed as it appeared. Directors noted that despite his charisma, the young actor was not a confident performer. He hadn't been formally trained, and on set he often struggled. Off-camera, Troy tried to play the role of the carefree celebrity, partying hard, dating a succession of beauties, indulging in the perks of success. But insecurity gnawed at him. He had started drinking heavily as a teenager, and now the cocktails before noon continued. He always had issues with his self-esteem. He suffered from insecurity, which is probably why he was drinking at a very early age. Donahue later admitted he never once faced the camera in those years without having a buzz on from alcohol. He would sneak gulps of vodka on set, or even spike his morning coffee with codeine-laced painkillers, whatever it took to calm his nerves and project easy confidence. If Troy Donahue's acting was sometimes wooden, as critics charged, the pressure he felt only made it harder for him to loosen up before the lens. For a time, though, none of these flaws mattered. The public idolized him for his looks, not his range. Donahue himself was self-deprecating about his talent. He didn't consider himself a very good actor. Indeed, Hollywood wisdom held that Troy's dramatic abilities were limited. Later, Broadway's smash musical A Chorus Line even lampooned him in a famous lyric. "If Troy Donahue could be a movie star, then I could be a movie star," sings one hopeful character not a little ironically. It got a knowing laugh from 1975 audiences, a gentle jab at Donahue's status as the ultimate proof that in 1960s Hollywood, looks could trump actual acting. Troy himself later chuckled at that reference. Still, such jabs hinted at how precarious his position might be once the teenage bubble burst. He bought a house in Hollywood with a pool and a garden, and he tooled around town in a powder blue Porsche sports car. The studio publicity machine spun his dating life into fan magazine gold. One month he might be squiring co-star Connie Stevens to premieres. Another month photographed poolside with the Miss Universe contestant. He was young, rich, and famous. What could go wrong? Plenty, as it turned out. For one, Troy's impulsive marriage to Suzanne Pleshette in January 1964 proved a mistake for both. The two actors had enjoyed genuine chemistry filming 1962's Rome Adventure, but their real-life union was troubled from the start, not least because the affair had begun while Troy was still engaged to Lily Cardell. They eloped in a small ceremony but barely had time to know each other amid their hectic work schedules. Within 8 months, the marriage fell apart and they divorced, with Pleshette citing mental cruelty. It was an embarrassingly short Hollywood marriage, a fact not lost on the press. Donahue put on a brave face, joking to gossip columns that at least he and Pleshette remained friends. But privately, he was stung. It was the first of what would be 4 failed marriages for him, and it reinforced a pattern. A deep need for companionship clashing with an inability to sustain it. He wanted people around him, but he was a lonely person. He didn't want to be alone, said actress Diane McBain, a friend and co-star, noting how Troy kept chasing love even as relationships slipped through his fingers. As the mid-1960s arrived, Troy's Golden Boy brand began to tarnish in the glare of a changing culture. The wholesome beach party innocence of his films suddenly looked dated amid the rise of Beatlemania, hippies, and the Vietnam War. Studio executives decided not to renew Donahue's contract in 1966, sensing that clean-cut teen idols were passé in an era turning toward edgier heroes. Practically overnight, the roles that had once poured in for Troy dried up. The actor was unprepared for this abrupt career downturn, and he handled it poorly. His drinking, already heavy, escalated into full-blown alcoholism, worsened by pills and cocaine that crept into his repertoire. Friends noticed a darker, erratic edge to him. Donahue made some attempts to reinvent himself as an actor, but these often backfired. In 1965, he starred in My Blood Runs Cold, a psychological thriller where he played wildly against type as a deranged killer believing in reincarnation. Donahue relished the chance to show range. He was happy to break type, but audiences and critics laughed the film off as schlock. It flopped at the box office and was derided as terrible, the beginning of the end of Troy's career. Even Donahue later admitted the movie was a mistake that marked the end of his Warner Brothers era. Around the same time, he publicly griped about being forced into lightweight fare like Palm Springs Weekend, a frothy frolic he called a beach party movie in the desert. He was drunk out of his mind throughout filming, according to co-star Carol Cook, who nonetheless recalled Troy as the most beautiful guy I've ever seen. Just one who happened to be, quote, bombed from morning till night on the set. Donahue's open dissatisfaction with such roles led to clashes with Warner Brothers executives. When he refused another teen romp script, the studio swiftly suspended him, a blow to his professional reputation from which he never recovered. By 1967, the Golden Boy had become, in Hollywood terms, damaged goods. Meanwhile, Troy's personal life was unraveling at the same brisk pace. In 1966, he had married again, this time to a statuesque actress named Valerie Allen, whom he met while filming a spy caper. The wedding took place in Dublin, Ireland, showing Troy's knack for doing things with dramatic flair, but almost immediately the marriage was plagued by conflict. Allen filed for divorce in 1968, citing extreme cruelty, and court papers detailed Donahue's drinking and erratic behavior. The divorce was finalized by the end of 1968, with Troy agreeing to a financial settlement that drained much of his remaining cash. 2 marriages down by age 32, Donahue was also mired in legal and financial woes. He had run up significant debts and unpaid taxes during the free-spending heyday of his fame. As he later admitted, I was living like a movie star but wasn't being paid like one. I lived way over my head and got into great trouble and lost everything. In October 1968, facing lawsuits and with virtually no income, Troy Donahue reluctantly declared bankruptcy. He lost his Hollywood home and even his fancy car. Soon he was reduced to sleeping on friends' couches and taking whatever odd appearance gigs he could find to scrape by. I spent a lot of time judging beauty contests and opening banks, he said sardonically of this period. One embarrassing incident from 1968 underscored how far his star had fallen. Donahue accepted an invitation from the USO to travel to Vietnam and entertain US troops. Partly, he admitted, because I had nowhere else to go. The jaunt ended ignominiously. He was caught obtaining so-called mind-numbing drugs from army nurses in Saigon and was promptly sent home in disgrace. Not even the military wanted Troy Donahue around in his dissolute state. In 1969, with Los Angeles offering nothing but painful memories, Troy Donahue fled Hollywood. He moved back east to New York City, attempting a fresh start in the town of his birth. For a moment, things looked hopeful. He married for a 3rd time, wedding a private secretary named Alma Sharp in November 1969. He also landed a 6-month stint on the CBS daytime soap opera, The Secret Storm. Not exactly marquee work, but a steady job that kept him afloat for a while. However, Donahue's demons trailed him to Manhattan. His marriage to Sharp quickly deteriorated amid fights over his hard-partying friends and drug use. Within a couple of years, Alma threw up her hands. She asked Troy to leave, and he grudgingly packed a single backpack and walked out. By 1970, Troy Donahue, former Hollywood heartthrob and star of A Summer Place, hit absolute bottom. Jobless, penniless, and addicted, he spent a period of about 6 months living literally in a bush in Central Park. The man who used to have fans break into his yard now slept outdoors in the public park, concealing himself in shrubbery at night. Everything he owned fit into a single backpack, which he clung to as he wandered the streets by day. To survive, he relied on the kindness of strangers, occasionally starstruck fans who recognized him and offered a meal or a couch. "I went home with fans for a hot meal or a shower," Donahue later admitted, "and for a couch or bed to sleep in. I did what I had to do." In a city of millions, he was utterly lost. One senses that at his lowest ebb, Merle Johnson Jr. was scarcely distinguishable from the tattered drifters around him. The newspapers didn't yet know of Troy Donahue's tragic circumstances, but he felt his own shame acutely. The youthful confidence and movie star ego had been stripped away entirely. In an ironic twist of fate, it was Hollywood, the very industry that had discarded him, that offered Troy a lifeline from this destitution. One of Donahue's former school friends from New York Military Academy heard through the grapevine about Troy's dire situation. That friend happened to be Francis Ford Coppola, who in 1973 was a rising director casting a sequel to The Godfather. Remembering his old classmate with compassion, Coppola reached out and offered Donahue a small role in The Godfather Part 2. Troy could hardly believe the offer. After years in the wilderness, here was a chance, in a prestige film no less. He would play Merle Johnson, the slick but hapless fiancé of Connie Corleone, in a few scenes set in Lake Tahoe. The character's name was an inside joke, Coppola giving Troy's real name a sly cameo, but the paycheck was anything but a joke. Donahue was paid $10,000 for a week's work, a windfall that allowed him to get off the streets and back on his feet, at least temporarily. More than the money, the role gave Troy something intangible but precious, a sense that he hadn't been entirely forgotten. The Godfather Part 2 released in 1974 and turned out to be an American classic. And though Donahue's screen time was brief, it was memorable. He brought an authentic, washed-up playboy energy to Merle, essentially playing a version of himself, opposite Al Pacino and Tyler Shire. For the first time in years, Troy Donahue's name was back on movie theater marquees, if only in small letters. However, real life did not magically turn around with this one lucky break. Donahue still carried the heavy baggage of addiction. Even as audiences saw him momentarily back on screen, he was too steeped in booze and drugs to leverage the cameo into steady work. The mid-1970s remained a struggle. Troy picked up a few roles in low-budget B-movies, a cockfighting drama here, a cheap horror flick there, but his days as a leading man were over. He spent more time in hospital beds, suffering recurring pancreatitis and other ailments caused by years of substance abuse. Embarrassing incidents piled up. In one notorious episode in 1979, he drunkenly disrupted a Hollywood party while accompanying actress Julie Newmar, making a public spectacle of himself before collapsing in a stupor. Donahue's fourth marriage to land developer Vicki Taylor that same year did nothing to slow his descent. He immediately fell back into self-destructive behavior, vanishing on binges for days, failing to show up for auditions, and ultimately prompting Vicki to divorce him by 1981. By that point, Troy Donahue was 45 years old and nearly destroyed. In early 1982 came the final wake-up call. Doctors warned Troy that if he didn't stop drinking, he would die, and soon. He looked in the mirror and saw a gaunt, aging man a world away from the golden youth he once was. With nowhere to go but the grave, Donahue finally found the will to change. In May 1982, he checked himself into Alcoholics Anonymous and got serious about sobriety. It was the hardest role of his life, recovering addict, but this time, he delivered the performance. "I realized I was going to die, or worse than that, I might live like that for the rest of my life," he said of the moment he decided to quit drinking. He threw himself into AA meetings and rehab programs with the same intensity he once devoted to learning lines. Miraculously, it worked. Troy Donahue got clean. He would remain sober for the next 19 years, right up until his death. Freed from the haze of alcohol and drugs, Troy Donahue entered the 1980s with a clear head for the first time as an adult. He would never regain the level of stardom he'd known in his 20s. That chapter was closed, but in many ways a better life was just beginning. Those who knew him observed a striking change. The very, very sweet guy that had always been underneath the Hollywood trappings emerged more fully. Donahue became the type of friend who would drive you to the doctor or lend a hand if you were in trouble. He finally couldn't do enough for you if someone needed help, Bob Palmer said of Troy's post-rehab generosity. After so many years of taking from others, he seemed eager to give back. Professionally, Troy made a modest comeback as a character actor, albeit mostly in low-budget fare. He popped up in a small supporting part in the 1984 Patrick Swayze drama Grandview, USA, and in a smattering of forgettable direct-to-video movies throughout the 80s. He even embraced the campier side of his past by appearing in a few tongue-in-cheek exploitation films that, at best, traded on his name. Titles like 1990's Sexbot and Nudity Required unsurprisingly went straight to video store upper shelves. Donahue was under no illusions about these gigs. They paid the bills and kept him busy. He also took on other unconventional acting jobs that would have made the old Troy cringe. In the late 80s, he toured in a stage production of the musical Bye Bye Birdie, bringing a wink of 1960s authenticity to the spoof of Elvis-era rockers. He even found work teaching acting classes on cruise ships for Holland American Line, giving lectures to vacationing passengers who were tickled to receive drama tips from a former teen idol. Troy took it all in stride. Having once been impossibly famous, he didn't mind being obscure. He had his own income, so he wasn't in avid pursuit of his career, Palmer noted. He didn't consider himself a great actor, so he no longer tortured himself about success. Still, now and then, Hollywood would tip its hat to Donahue's enduring legend. In 1990, cult director John Waters, a connoisseur of retro Americana, cast Troy in a cameo role in the kitschy musical comedy Cry Baby, starring Johnny Depp. And by the way, Waters is a figure you can hear more about in my video all about him, linked on screen now. The 54-year-old Donahue was nearly unrecognizable from his matinee idol days, his once flaxen hair now gray and his face lined. But Waters knew exactly what he was doing. It was a loving homage to the teen idols of yesteryear that the film affectionately parodied. Audiences of a certain age gave a delighted gasp seeing Troy Donahue on screen again. The greatest grace note of Troy's later years, however, came not from career revival but from personal happiness. After 4 failed marriages, Donahue finally found lasting love, and it arrived when he least expected. In October 1991, while hosting an acting seminar aboard a cruise ship, Troy met a gifted young mezzo-soprano named Zhang Chao. Chao was a Chinese-born opera singer in her 20s who was performing on the ship. Despite an almost 30-year age difference, the two hit it off and began dating. Zhang brought serenity and stability into Troy's life. Before long, the couple were living together in Santa Monica, California, and Donahue was introducing Zhang as his fiancée. For the next decade, she was his devoted companion, essentially a fifth wife in all but name, and Troy positively doted on her. The once notorious ladies' man had calmed down at last. Troy even said at one point, "I'm really happy to just be Mr. Chow." It was a touching admission from a man who had spent so long chasing fame and attention. Remarkably, Troy also got to experience another deeply fulfilling surprise. He became a father figure after all. In the early 1980s, shortly after getting sober, Donahue received a shock when a woman he'd had a brief fling with back in 1969 introduced him to a 13-year-old boy named Sean. "The spitting image of what I'd look like when I was young," Troy marveled. "This is your son," the woman told him. Sean had known all along who his father was, but Troy had been oblivious. Stunned yet elated, Donahue immediately embraced the boy and began to build a relationship with him. A few years later, in 1987, another revelation arrived. A woman named Janine Curtis contacted Troy claiming to be his daughter. She had been born in 1964 and given up for adoption. Upon tracing her biological mother, she learned Donahue was her father. Troy agreed to meet Janine, and again he welcomed his newfound child with open arms. For the remaining years of his life, Donahue remained close with both Sean and Janine, integrating them into his family circle. The man who once seemed destined to die lonely and childless now counted 2 adult children and eventually 3 grandchildren as part of his legacy. It was, by all accounts, a source of immense joy and pride for him. In the summer of 2001, Troy Donahue was 65 years old and feeling good. He stayed active, working out at the gym daily, and by all indications he was healthy, with no major medical issues. He and Zhang were planning for the future, perhaps even considering a wedding. Then, on August 30th, 2001, without warning, Troy suffered a massive heart attack at his Santa Monica home shortly after returning from a workout. Rushed to St. John's Health Center, he underwent an emergency angioplasty that initially seemed successful. Conscious and even joking a bit, Donahue was poised to begin recovery. But the following day, he was hit by a second, more devastating heart attack. Despite bypass surgery, Troy Donahue died on September 2, 2001, with Zhang Chao at his side. The one-time Hollywood heartthrob who had outlived the frenzy of fame and conquered his demons was gone. He was 65 years old. News of Donahue's passing prompted an outpouring of nostalgic tributes. Many were surprised to learn what had become of him. In the public imagination, Troy remained forever the bronzed youth of a summer place. Obituaries fondly recalled him as the hunky, blonde, blue-eyed teen idol of a bygone era. Former colleagues remembered him as kind and humble. Actress Diane McBain, who had seen his lowest moments, described Troy as sweet and funny, but also a loner in the crowd. In the end, Troy Donahue's life played out like a scripted Hollywood cautionary tale. The rise of the golden boy, the fall into oblivion, and the quiet climb back to normalcy. If there is a lesson in his journey, perhaps it's that early fame can be a double-edged sword. Donahue himself reflected later in life on how surreal it was to watch a summer place after so many years. Seeing his impossibly handsome 23-year-old self in close-up with Sandra Dee on screen, he reportedly shook his head in wonder. He knew he'd been to the mountaintop, and he also knew what the valley felt like. In a postscript to his death, his daughter Janine Curtis filed a class-action lawsuit against the pharmaceutical giant Merck & Co., believing that the prescription painkiller Vioxx was the cause of his sudden and unexpected death. The case became messy when Curtis's lawyers discovered that her biological mother had given her up for adoption at birth, legally overturning her right to Donahue's estate. She had also told her lawyers to accept a settlement from Merck of $300,000 without informing the executor of the estate, Troy's sister, Eve O'Neill. The battle became messy, but ultimately Curtis was awarded the settlement from Merck relating to his Vioxx-induced death. More than 2 decades after his passing, Troy Donahue's name still evokes that sun-kissed moment in American pop culture when the teenage dream was personified in one flaxen-haired young man. In his final years, Troy Donahue was, by all accounts, a contented man, grateful for a peaceful life far from the spotlight. He had learned in his own hard way that there is life after fame, and sometimes it can be happier than the Hollywood fantasy he once lived. I'd like to give a special shout out to our most generous supporter, Valerie Filito. This video was a special request by Valerie, thanks to one of the many perks she receives from being a top-tier Patreon supporter and YouTube member. If you'd like to support the channel, be sure to take a look at what else is on offer over on Patreon. I'd like to thank Valerie and all of those who have signed up to support the channel. Every single one of you has my heartfelt thanks, and I hope you are enjoying the exclusive episodes now running every week. If you enjoyed this one, be sure to let me know your favorite Troy Donahue movie down in the comments. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe too. Until next week, sweet dreams.